Here I'm using the 6B charcoal pencil to map in the dark areas I want to preserve on the legs before I put in the base coats. So I'm outlining the top leg with my 6B pencil. Going around the bend in the leg, being as accurate as I can on these shapes. This horse has a lot of feather or hair around the near the feet. We're going to put those in too. So I'm just kind of roughing in where the shadows are going to go on this leg. And as I've told you, by using the charcoal pencil to do this, it will show through the subsequent layers of pastel. I'm going to speed this up just a little bit while I do this. So I'm using my pencil at an angle, mostly on the side, to lay in this dark color along these tendons in the horse's leg. And as it begins to turn into the shadow on the leg, I want to note that. Now I'm working on the underneath leg, adding the dark shadows as well. Now I'm going to use my white pastel pencil, and I'm going to add some highlight areas on the front of the leg where the light strikes. And on the top of the foot where it bends. I'm also using my white pencil to pull out some of the long hairs from the feather around the horse's ankle. This way they'll show through the subsequent layers of color. So I'm adding the white on the top of the bottom leg. I'm defining that edge a little more. Now in between the top leg and the bottom leg is a little slit of background. So I'm going to color that in with the green 626.5 Cinnabar green light. Now I'm going to start adding these underlayers. So I'm using my dark blue 508.5 Prussian blue, and you can see that the white I put in the highlight area shows through, which is what we want it to do. So I've turned it on its end. And you can also see the white lines I put in for the hair of the feather show through as well. I've decided at this point to go ahead and outline the hoof of the horse. And I'm going to draw in this the hair and the other foot and hoof. I'm using my white pastel pencil, or white charcoal pencil, excuse me, to draw in a few more hairs on the horse's leg. And I'm going to add some shadow areas with my charcoal pencil. And now we'll base coat it in blue. I'm going to add a little more blue to that back leg as well. Now we come with our next coat, which is the 707.3 dark gray. So we're putting in our next coat of color. Getting that back leg as well. And the hind leg of the horse. This is the 700.5. I'm adding this black layer, soft Rembrandt black, over the two previous layers we put down. I didn't go back over it with my hard blue. You could, but I didn't really see that it was necessary in this case. But you definitely could do that if you wanted to. And now I've switched to my 229 black to start making the coat a bit blacker. I'm working on this back leg. I'm going to draw that edge and get that shape more defined. And I've flipped over my 229. I'm using the bottom end of it to add the dark shadow areas on the leg of this horse. Now I have my 211 white, making that bright edge on the side of the chest with the point of that pastel. And now I'm just going to be working with the 229 for a while, getting in these dark shapes. Now I've sped things up a little bit as I just continue to use the 229 black to add the shadows to the horse's leg. When I'm doing this, I just use whichever end of the 229 works best for me, whether it's the point or the bottom edge. And now I'm going to add some 538.5 Mars Violet to the horse's leg in particular spots, not all over. So I'm just kind of glazing it on the upper part of the leg. I've decided to add some of that 538.5 behind the leg on the body of the horse. And just make decisions as I go along to see what color might work best. Now I'm going to use the 299 to put a little bit of reflected light on the back of that leg, which shows the delineation between the body of the horse and the leg of the horse. So I'm just gently applying that with the flat side of my NuPastel stick. And then I'm adding a little highlight, shiny area where the light strikes on the horse's leg with the 299. Continuing to add highlights with the flat side of the 299. It's just making those areas a little bit brighter that we added light to in the last part of our video workshop. Put a little bit on the knee of the horse. This time I'm going to use sharp edge. It's a smaller area, so I'm just putting a little bit there with the edge of my pastel stick. And continuing to use the 299 just to add a little bit more in different places. Now I have my 211 white, and I'm going to brighten the areas where we applied the 299 just a little bit more. So as you remember, we worked from 289 to 299 to 211. And each time we covered a smaller area, which is generally the way that works. So I'm back to using 299, working down the front of the leg. Now I'm using the 211 again. Going very slowly and deliberately, just tuning up that light area. Now this is my 100.5 white again. Remember, we used it on the face of the horse. And so I'm using it here to put some super bright white areas into the highlights. Just a little bit, not too much. Now I'm using the 700.5 black Rembrandt to add color over the front leg that is behind, the one furthest back. I'm going to use the same process, building up color. And I'm going to use my 229 NuPastel to make that even darker. Now I'm using that little tiny piece of NuPastel that I broke off that we talked about before to add a little color on that, to darken it just a bit on that front leg. And now I'm using it on the back leg as well. And now I'm using the point of the NuPastel to get up close to that hoof. And now I'm using my 299 NuPastel to draw out some of those hairs around the hoof. And we'll draw more after we finish the background. Behind these legs, we'll draw more of the hairs into the background. I'm continuing to add those hairs. I have a very sharp pastel, so I can get very fine hairs that I can draw around that hoof. That's beautiful. I love the way this is turning out. And I think I'll add a few little lines here that will represent highlights on that back leg. I'm using very light touch for that. I'm going to add some dark back into all those hairs with my 229. And now I'm working on the hoofs. And for the hoof, I'm using 283 Van Dyke Brown to just color in that hoof. We use that in the eye, and so I think it'd be a good idea if we used it in the hoof as well. So I'm just coloring both of them in. It's kind of like coloring book style, just flat coloring. And now to shade the hoof, I'm going to use 259 dark gray. I'm creating a shadow on the bottom side of the hoof and where the shoe is attached to the hoof, giving it that three-dimensional effect. And I'm going to do the same thing for the leg that's behind the top leg. Now we need some light highlight on the hoof, so I'm going to use 299. We're going to do the shoe, and then we're going to add the light color into the hoof to give it a three-dimensional look. Don't need much light, just a little. I'm going back with the 211 white, add just a little more brightness on the shoe and on the hoof. Now I'm going back to add a little more brown. I think it got a little light there, so I'm using my 283 to add a little more brown. Now we're going to start on that remaining background. So I'm going to put a layer of 727.8 light blue gray in this area. Getting up close to the legs, going around the hoofs. I can go right over the feathered hair because we used the white charcoal pencil to draw that in so it shows up, and then we'll reinforce that later. So I'm also going to finish the background on the right side of the painting and underneath those beautiful legs. Now I'm going to use my 259 dark gray NuPastel to add a little more shading to the hoof before going on with the background. So for my first color in the background, I'm going to use the 231.5 gold ochre to add that underneath the horse. I'm going around the hooves with this color, using it up on the end when I need to get in the tight spots, and then on the flat edge when I'm doing larger areas of the background. I got a little spot there, too much color, so I'm going to puff that away with my camera blower, and you can see it does a really good job for that. It's always a good idea to have one on hand. And now I'm going to add the gold on the other side of the horse's legs. I'm going to speed this up a little bit so we can get this background put in. So now I'm adding my dark green, 627.3 Cinnabar Deep, building up those layers just like we did before. So this is going to take some time to finish this. This is a rather large project. It is 11 by 14 finished. So I have to stop every now and then and go sand that green. And now I've added the lighter color green, 626.5. And now some blue, 505.8 ultramarine blue. It's a beautiful color. And some gold over that. And let's throw a little violet in there too, 536.3. So we're just building up that background. 538.5 Mars Violet. Put some of that in there. Back to the dark green. I'm pushing very hard, pushing the color into the paper. Now I'm using my 538 Mars Violet very carefully on the side of the horse's leg, going up right next to it and gently adding that color. Now I'm switch to the blue around the hooves, and when I apply the blue over that gold, it makes a blue-gray, a very pretty blue-gray. And I'm going to put that blue, I think, underneath the horse as well. I've speeded things up just a little bit as I add these background colors. I'm adding one after the other. I'm using the light blue right now, and then I'm going to go back and add, this is the dark green, and use all of the other colors we've used in this as well. Now I'm using some light green in that same area. Some violet. And then I'm going over that with the gold ochre, kind of smooths it out some. And back with the light green. You have to add colors and back and forth until you achieve the result you're looking for. You can direct your viewer's eye according to your color choices and the value of the colors that you put in. We talked about putting dark at the corners so your viewer's eye wouldn't be let out. So as I'm working, I'm continuing to decide what's going to work and what isn't going to work with my color choices. And now I have my 211 white, and I'm going to pull out some of these hairs. I haven't finished with the background yet, but every now and then I have to stop and do something different. So I wanted to add those hairs. Look how gorgeous these little hairs are. It's that attention to detail that's going to really pull people into our painting. And then I go back with my black and refine that a little more. And if you get tired while you're painting, it's a good idea to stop and step back and look at what you're doing with fresh eyes. Take a break and then come back to what you're doing. Now I finished the background and I'm looking over my piece to see if there's anything I want to change, and I don't think that I have all the values right. So I've decided to take my 700 black and add it over this section of the mane, pushing that backwards. And then I decided I need some brighter color. So I'm using 405 NuPastel Blue Haze. I love this color. I decided to use it to add some blue into the mane of the horse. And that really added something to the picture. I'm glad I made that choice to do that. And then I also added it in some of the highlight areas on the horse's body. And so this is a real finishing touch to the project. And I hope that you've enjoyed working on this horse in pastel, and that you can use the things presented here when you paint other black animals. Please let me know how you liked it and how you've enjoyed it. See, I'm going to add some blue haze right here on the side of the cheek. I love it. Isn't that beautiful? So do give these ideas a try. Continue to tweak some of these areas and just take a good hard look at my painting. I hope you've enjoyed this project and that you'll join me again in the future for another video workshop.